Hey, I'm from Mexico, and my family is kind of wealthy. That's why we have a maid living with us who does the housework.
She also has a daughter called Maria, who's 1 year older than me.
We never talked much because Maria wasn't allowed to leave her small chamber unless she helped with the housework or had to go to school. I know we didn't treat her well, but a few months ago, she started giving me eye contact, and I always smiled back at her. I mean, she was quite beautiful. I even tried talking to her, but she was too shy and couldn't bring out a single word. But one Saturday morning, she came into my room to bring me breakfast. I told her, "Oh wow, that looks awesome. Thank you so much." That's when I noticed that she was wearing a rather revealing outfit. She put the breakfast on my bed, bowed down, and said, "Sir, can I do you any other favor?" Wow, I could see her bra, and it was so arousing. I offered her to sit down on my bed and eat the breakfast with me together. It was the first time we had a real conversation, and after a few minutes, she said, "It's very cold in here." I responded, "I'm sorry, the air conditioning is too strong, but you can come under my blanket." Suddenly, we were laying right next to each other, with my legs touching hers. I even put my hand on her thighs. Things were great until my mom came into the room. She saw us and said, "Oh my God, what are you doing? How can you sleep with a girl like her?" Maria was so embarrassed. She ran outside. Meanwhile, I tried to explain to my mom that we hadn't slept with each other. But my mom responded, "She only wants to get pregnant by you, so she gets our money." Wow, my mom always saw the worst in other people. No wonder, she was a terrible person herself. I mean, our maid was living with us for 5 years, and we still treated her like a worthless servant. My family didn't even pay for Maria's school fees. But I liked her a lot, and we started seeing each other in secret. I still remember the first time she came into my room at night. She was still shy and only said, "Hey." I stood up and said, "Wow, you look beautiful." But she was so nervous, she couldn't even look me in the eyes. I had never felt more aroused. She was wearing a short black dress, and I couldn't help myself. I put my hand on her wrist and pulled her towards me. Then I grabbed her hair, pulled it back, and kissed her. This was the first of many nights we spent together. But then it happened. She told me she was pregnant. I was confused and said, "But we always use protection. How could this happen?" She said she didn't know either. But I had a suspicion. Maybe after we slept with each other, she had searched the trash and pulled out my protection. But of course, that's just a suspicion. Anyway, it was hard to tell my parents about the baby. Both of them freaked out, and my dad even wanted to throw Maria out on the streets. I was shocked and said, "No, I love her, and I want to be her boyfriend. She isn't as bad of a girl as you think." I guess my parents were disappointed I wouldn't marry a girl from a good family. But I really didn't care. Maria was a lovely girl, and she was carrying my baby. However, in the first few months of our relationship, I learned that we were quite different. I don't want to sound arrogant, but Maria was less educated than me, and I didn't enjoy talking to her much. I still tried to be a responsible dad, but when I turned 18, I went to my first party. It was so crazy with all those beautiful girls. I stayed faithful that night and didn't kiss or sleep with another girl, but afterward, I started having doubts about my relationship with Maria. Maybe I wasn't ready for a family, and things got worse when I went to university. There were so many pretty girls, and many of them were flirting with me. I just couldn't take it anymore, so I went to Maria and said, "I know you'll be angry, but I want an open relationship." She started crying and said, "No, that's not fair." But I responded, "I'm just too young for a serious relationship. I'm sorry." I knew I was a douche because Maria had no choice. She couldn't leave me because she had no money. She was dependent on me. And as horrible as it sounds, I kind of like that because it made me feel powerful. Well, after Maria had given birth, my parents rented us a small apartment next to my university where we moved in. But I partied often and even brought girls home. And yes, I took them into the same bed my girlfriend was lying in. She would act as if she was asleep most of the time. But one night, I was drunk. woke her up, and asked if she wanted to join us. But she just started crying and ran outside. That ruined my mood, and I apologized to her afterward. Gosh, I knew I was such a jerk, but I still continued. One of my favorite girls I was dating was Mathilde. She was well educated and funny. I told her I had an open relationship with my girlfriend, and then I asked her if she wanted to move in with us. She was reluctant at first, but finally agreed. It was so awkward when I introduced her to Maria. I said, "Maria, this is Mathilde. We've been seeing each other for a few weeks now, and I want her to become part of our relationship." I could tell Maria was angry. Of course, she wanted me all for herself. But that wouldn't happen, and a three-way relationship was still better than me breaking up with Maria. Then I pulled both of them close to me, and we all kissed each other. Gosh, it was one of the most exciting moments of my life. But it got even better afterwards. We also all slept in the same bed, which I loved, but they didn't get along so well and often insulted each other. Their conflict escalated when Mathilde accidentally used Maria's towel. Maria freaked out, and they ended up physically fighting each other wearing short pants on my bed. It sounds terrible, but it aroused me to see them fight over me. However, I still broke up the fight to make sure no one got hurt. In the end, Maria and I decided it couldn't continue like that. And now my parents are paying her $1,000 each month to rent her own apartment where she raises my daughter. I take care of my daughter on the weekends, and I really enjoy being a dad. But university is more important right now, so I can find a good job one day and provide well for both my daughter and Maria. A long time ago, I found a little baby monkey on the side of the street. His mother was nowhere around, so I decided to take him home with me. We were really poor, so to feed him, I had to starve myself. But he kept growing bigger and bigger, which meant he needed more and more food. I was getting so thin, I was close to death, and my mom forced me to let him go. I was crying as I opened the door, and he ran outside. I felt like I had lost a good friend. But after a few hours, I heard a knock at the door. So I opened it up, and there was my monkey friend again. He was holding 4 bananas and gave one to me, one to my sister, and one to my mom. Of course, we thanked the monkey and told him to go get more bananas. But this time he came back with 1 papaya and 1 mango. We figured he must have stolen them from the market. Well, this went on for several weeks. But one day he came back with a little gold necklace. It was beautiful, so the next day I gave it to a girl in my class named Ananya. She was even poorer than we were. Her mother had died, so she had to work as a maid for my evil classmate Champak after going to school all day. Champak treated her like a servant. He made her carry his books everywhere. And he loved barking orders at her in front of the whole class. I put the necklace around her neck, and she looked so beautiful. She gave me a kiss on my cheek and said, "Thank you." But the next day, she came back crying. She said Champak took the necklace from her and accused her of stealing it. He was really mean to her about it and punished her by making her scrub his room with a toothbrush. I wanted to fight Champak. I wanted to end him. But he was as strong as a grown man. Besides that, his father was powerful and could easily take revenge on my mom and sister. He could have done terrible things to them. I was devastated and went home feeling helpless. But then I saw my monkey bring us more bananas, and that gave me an idea. I'd train him to steal from Champak's home. Maybe he'd even find some valuable stuff to bring me. To train him, I hid a fake golden wristband around our house. Anytime he found it, I rewarded him with a little bit of chocolate. Once the monkey was well trained, I took him to Champak's place. There was a huge wall around it, but that was no problem because my monkey friend could climb it easily. He jumped from the wall onto the house and went in through a window. I didn't see the monkey for several minutes, and then I heard a scream coming from inside the house. I was getting nervous, but then my monkey came back climbing down the wall, and he was carrying a gold necklace with a beautiful stone. He gave it to me, and I stashed it in my pocket. I started running toward home, but my stupid monkey went back inside Champak's house. While I got home safely, my monkey didn't make it. The next day, I went back to Champak's house to look for my friend. There, I saw a poster. It said, "If you want this monkey, give us back our jewelry." That monkey had been my friend. I loved him very much, and I hated to lose him. But the jewelry he'd given me was worth enough to get Ananya away from Champak's family. So, my mom and I went to another city to sell the necklace safely. We took the best offer and came home with 60,000 US dollars. That's a huge amount of money in my country. It was enough that my mom and I could buy a small house. We invited Ananya to live with us for free, and she seems a lot happier since she became a part of our family. At last, I want to thank my monkey friend. Thanks to him, we can live a comfortable life.
Hey, I'm Veronica, and I grew up in Mexico. My family had always been poor, and one day we decided to move to the US for a better life. But once we arrived, things only got harder. My mom couldn't find a job, so my sister and I were practically homeless. In a last attempt, I decided to find a boyfriend or some kind of man that could support us financially. I mean, I was 21 and rather good looking. I bought a short dress and some high heels. Then I went to the most exclusive bar in our city. A lot of weird guys approached me, and I was willing to say yes to any of them. But, of course, I wanted to see just how well I could do. There was one guy in the corner, sitting right next to an extremely beautiful girl. He was holding her in his muscular arms, and his face was so damn handsome. I normally wouldn't do such things, but I just sat next to him and interrupted his conversation with the other beautiful girl. I said, "Hey, my name is Veronica. You're very handsome." He turned to me and said, "You look good too." I could see he was a playboy. He had been with many girls, and the way he stared into my eyes told me he was dangerous. The other girl got jealous and tried to get his attention back, but he pushed her down the couch to make more space for me. Then I realized just how muscular and strong he was. He put his big arms around me. If he wanted, he could have hurt me so easily, but I'd never felt more attached to a guy. I leaned over to him to try and kiss him, but he pushed me away and said, "You think you can have me that easily?" I said, "I will do anything to please you." And he responded, "Will you?" He pressed me against his big body. I was so small compared to him. After we left the bar, I followed him to his car. I wasn't sure if I should go with him. I had just met him, and I saw in his face that he wasn't a pushover. No, he had no problem to hurt someone, and against my instinct, I went home with him. On the ride, he put his big hand upon my leg. I was wearing a short dress, and his hand went all around my thigh. When we arrived at his home, I realized how rich he was. I asked him what he was doing for a living, and he told me he was a professional athlete. Well, that explained why he was so muscular. And we didn't even make it to the bedroom. We made out right on the living room couch. I loved the way he put his big hand around my neck. It was such a thrill. He could have hurt me so easily, but that's what I liked. The next morning I woke up. I asked him for his number, but he said this was a one-time thing. Come and visit him, you know?
Hey, I'm Anika, and until the age of 17, I had a perfectly normal life. I was pretty, good in school, and in a happy relationship with my boyfriend Louis. Well, at least that's what I thought, because one night, everything changed. I was on my way back home from ballet practice when a guy ran up to me and threw a bucket full of liquid on my face. At first, I thought it was a prank, but then my face started to burn more and more until I blacked out. When I woke up again, everything was dark. I thought the lights were off, but something was different. My whole upper body was hurting, and when I touched my face, I couldn't feel my eyes or nose. My whole face felt like an old margarita pizza, and all I had left was my mouth to breathe through. I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare. No light, no face. I wanted to cry, but I had no eyes, so instead I said, "Where am I? Where am I?" It was hard to speak without lips, but fortunately my right ear still worked. So I heard my mom when she said, "You're alive. Oh, my love, what have they done to you?" She was crying and hugging me. After she calmed down, she told me that someone had thrown acid in my face, and it had burned away my eyes, my nose, and lips. So it wasn't a nightmare. My face was really gone. But why would anyone do this to me? I'd always been a very friendly girl, and even when my classmates made fun of me, saying I wasn't smart, I never talked back. I just don't like conflict. But my anger quickly turned to shame when my boyfriend came to my hospital bed. Even though I couldn't see, I knew how ugly I must have looked to him. He asked me, "How are you?" But it didn't even sound like he was worried about me. I could even hear a bit of disgust in his voice. It felt like he had only come to visit me because it was his duty as my boyfriend. Because after just a few minutes, he left again. I never felt so bad before, and this time I was able to cry. I could feel that somewhere under my skin, tears were forming. The day the police came to visit me, they wanted me to describe what happened, and they asked if I had any enemies or if someone had threatened me. I told them I couldn't think of anyone. But 2 years earlier, one of my old classmates had threatened me, saying, "Be careful or I'll throw acid on you." But that was 2 years ago, and I never took it seriously. That girl had been jealous of me because I was in a relationship with Lewis. I knew that in my city of London, acid attacks were common within the Black and Muslim community. But I'm 100% white, and my parents are of Irish descent. After a month of investigation, the police found out what happened. They figured out that my old classmate who had threatened me 2 years before had an affair with my boyfriend Lewis behind my back. But because he didn't want to break up with me, she paid her cousin £200 to throw acid in my face. The police found the exact same acid that was thrown on me on her cousin's clothes. The police also took GPS data from his phone that showed he was very close to me on the night of the accident. The trial went on for several months. When the cousin was asked if he wanted to apologize to me, he started crying and said he was so sorry. But you could hear in his voice that he was only acting. He came up with one excuse after the other for why he'd thrown acid on me. He even said his parents had never loved him, and he needed the £200 his cousin gave him to pay off his debts. Listening to his excuses disgusted me, and even the judge told him to shut up because no one wanted to hear his lies anymore. In the end, both of them got 20-year prison sentences. But to be honest, I'm not sure if that's fair considering they've ruined my face for the rest of my life. And, if they behave well in prison, they might get out much earlier. I recently visited my former classmate in prison, the one who had ordered the acid attack. Of course, it was weird meeting her. I had no eyes to look at her directly, so all we could do was talk. I asked why she had done it, and she explained that she had always envied my beauty. She said it broke her heart when me and Lewis became a couple, and the only way to take him away from me was to destroy my beauty. At last, I asked her if she regretted what she had done, and she immediately said yes, because now she would have to spend the best years of her life inside prison. That's when I realized that some people truly only care about themselves. She didn't apologize or anything. She only regretted being caught for her crime. I gotta be honest, I still sometimes get angry about what happened to me. It was such a senseless crime where everybody involved lost. The hardest part is that I'll probably never find another boyfriend. After what happened to my face, my now ex-boyfriend Lewis cut off all contact with me. And I gotta admit that this hurt even more than the acid attack. But it won't stop me from living the good life. My parents recently bought me a guide dog, and to be honest, I like him even more than I liked my ex-boyfriend. And even without a boyfriend, I can still get pregnant using a sperm donor and have my own kids. I just hope that in a few decades, Technology will advance far enough that my doctors can fix my eyes and face again. But luckily, there are many jobs for blind people like me. Right now, I'm working as a call center agent during the day, and I've also started practicing DJing as a new hobby. I guess all of us face tragedies and evil in our lives. And even though it wasn't my fault that someone threw acid in my face, it would be my fault if I let it make me become bitter and resentful. That's why I'm not calling for retribution, but for more police and harsher punishments to prevent this senseless violence. Because right now, acid attacks here in the UK are on the rise, and some of the victims are less than 10 years old. Thank you for listening to my story, and let me know in the comments how you would deal with losing your face and becoming blind. Have you ever done something truly evil and destroyed someone's whole life? Well, I have. I was 19 and about to graduate from high school, but then my math teacher, Mr. Cumberbatch, told me I'd failed his class and would have to repeat the year. I was devastated because I had already made plans to go to college, so I started crying and begged him to show mercy and let me pass. But he said, no, and shook his head. In a last attempt, I gave him a big hug and said, "Please, Mr. Cumberbatch, isn't there anything I can do?" He pushed me away and said, "No, it's too late now." But I showed persistence and kept begging him, saying, "Please, please, please, Mr. Cumberbatch, isn't there anything I can do for you?" Finally, he had a change of heart and wrote down an address on a paper and said, "Okay, come here on Saturday, 6 p.m. We will do some math exercises, and if you do well, I will change your grade and let you pass." I gave him one last hug and said, "Thank you, Mr. Cumberbatch, you are the best." When Saturday arrived, I was very nervous. I didn't know if I was going on a date or if I was getting a private math lesson. But just to be sure, I dressed myself up. I put on my old school uniform, but made a few changes to look as exciting as possible. When I arrived at his house, he opened the door and said, "Come in, you're looking gorgeous today." I responded with, "Thank you, Mr. Cumberbatch, you're looking good too." We sat down at a desk and he told me to solve some math problems, but I couldn't focus. Mr. Cumberbatch was so close to me and I realized how attractive he was. I mean, I was 19 and he was only 10 years older than me. What turned me on the most was the authority he had over me. He could decide whether I would pass the year or repeat it. At one point, I just stared into his eyes and hoped he would kiss me, but I guess he was too nervous. So instead, I kissed him, and he liked it. Kissing my high school teacher wasn't technically illegal, but we still broke the rules of our school. A teacher-student relationship was strictly prohibited, but that's what made it so exciting. When we said goodbye to each other, I asked him if I had studied enough to pass the year, and he said, "You have worked very hard today, and therefore I will let you pass." I said, "Thank you, Mr. Cumberbatch," and gave him one more kiss on his mouth. This might shock you, but it was my first time. And because of my inexperience, I forgot to tell him to use protection. So 2 weeks later, I found out I was pregnant. I didn't mind, though, because I really liked Mr. Cumberbatch. The next day, I went up to him at school to tell him about the baby. I secretly hoped we would become a couple. But when he heard the news, he got angry and said, "You will go to the pharmacy right now and get the pill." I didn't like the way he talked to me. This was my body and therefore my decision. I asked him if he was interested in raising the baby with me, but he freaked out and screamed, "I already have a wife and kid. I'll never take care of your stupid baby. Go to the pharmacy right now." I screamed back, "You're married?" And he said, "Of course, and don't act like you didn't know. All my students know I have a wife and kid." Wow, what a jerk! Not only did he betray his wife, but now he was trying to put the blame on me. I got angry and said, "I will keep the baby and tell your wife what you did." That's when he almost had a seizure and screamed right at me, "You won't do that." But then I had an idea. I knew I would keep the baby anyway, but at least I could pretend to make a deal with him. I said, "If you turn all my grades into straight A's, then I will change my mind on the baby." Mr. Cumberbatch was desperate. He agreed to the deal and snuck into our school at night to change my grades on the principal's computer. But 2 days later, on my graduation day, things went wrong. When my principal handed over my report card, he took a quick look at it and said, "There must have been a mistake." I immediately knew my plan had failed, and the next day I got my real report card, and my grades were terrible. The only A I got was in Mr. Cumberbatch's math class. I knew it wasn't his fault, but I was so angry, I found out his address and went to his house. A woman opened the door, and she was pregnant too! I asked her if she was the wife of Mr. Cumberbatch, and she said yes. Then Mr. Cumberbatch appeared next to her. He stared at me in a very threatening way. For a moment I had doubts, but then I looked straight into her eyes and said, "Your husband got me pregnant, and he has no interest in taking responsibility for his mistake." I hoped she would get angry at her husband, but instead she got angry at me, screaming, "You bitch! You've seduced my husband, you dirty bitch!" Wow, if Mr. Cumberbatch hadn't held her back from me, I might not be alive today. I was shocked and went back home, but it got worse. The next day, she came to my house and used a golf club to break in through a window. My parents weren't at home to protect me, so I fled to the rooftop and called the police. They arrived in time and took Mrs. Cumberbatch into custody. 2 weeks later, she was sentenced to 24 months in prison. But this story gets even crazier. I called up Mr. Cumberbatch and told him we needed to talk. We met at a restaurant and I asked him, "How much child support will you pay me each month?" He responded, "I'm only a teacher. I don't make much money." But I asked again, "How much child support are you going to pay me?" He said, "Look, my pregnant wife is in prison and we both know she is insane. I will divorce her as soon as possible and I'd like you to come live with me. It will be the best for both you and the baby." I immediately said yes because I was scared of being a single mom. But after my daughter was born, I had to take care of both her and Mr. Cumberbatch's other baby. At first I didn't mind. I loved them both. But then I saw how Mr. Cumberbatch preferred his other daughter over mine. He spent more time with her and treated her so much better. Every morning he said to her, "Hey sweetie, good morning. I love you so much." And then he completely ignored my daughter. I had to admit that she was the perfect child. Extremely beautiful and very smart, much smarter than my daughter. At age 2, she already spoke fluently. I often screamed at Mr. Cumberbatch, telling him to treat them equally, but he never did. At one point, I couldn't take it anymore. I went to a lawyer and asked him how much the father of my child had to pay me in child support on a $40,000 teacher salary. He told me to expect at least $1,000 per month. That was a good amount, but I knew I could do better. So I went to Mr. Cumberbatch and said, "I will move out, but I expect you to pay me $2,000 in child support each month." Of course, he told me he didn't have enough money to do that. But I continued, "If you don't pay me the money, I will tell the school authorities that you got me pregnant while I was one of your students. I'm sure they will fire you for that." He got angry and said, "How stupid are you? If I'm going to lose my job, then how am I going to pay your child support?" I responded, "You are demanded by the law to pay my child support anyway. If you don't, you will go to prison just like your wife." "You are insane! All you women are insane!" he said. But I didn't care. I told him to get a second job, and we figured he could tutor kids to afford the $2,500 in child support. Meanwhile, I moved back in with my parents, and life became much easier for me. Right now, my mom takes care of my daughter while I'm going to college. With the $2,500 Mr. Cumberbatch sends me each month, I have enough money to feed my daughter and party through the weekends. Trust me, I really enjoy my college life. But Mr. Cumberbatch had to move into a cheaper and smaller house. He couldn't afford his old rent anymore. I knew it was wrong, but for some reason, I deeply enjoyed seeing Mr. Cumberbatch suffer. A few months later, I checked his Facebook and saw he was back with Mrs. Cumberbatch. I was still envious of their daughter. I didn't think they deserved such a perfect child. So one night, after I came back from a college party, I did something terrible. I put a bunch of photos of me holding Mrs. Cumberbatch's daughter on a USB stick, put it in an envelope, and sent it to their new home. I wanted to let Mrs. Cumberbatch know that her husband and I had been living together while she was in prison. I'd hoped she'd get angry and break into my house so the police could arrest her again. But this time nothing happened. And instead of giving up, I took it one step further. When it was time to receive my next child support check, I went to their home to pick it up personally. Mrs. Cumberbatch opened the door looking shocked to see me. I said, "I want to pick up my child support check in person." She said, "What are you talking about?" And I responded, "Your husband didn't tell you? He pays me $2,000 per month in child support so I can take care of my daughter." I saw she was getting angry. And then her daughter came to the door and saw me. She immediately started screaming out of joy and ran up to me. Her mother said, "Don't touch her." But I didn't care. I picked her up and said, "Oh, there's my baby. Mama is back now." Her mother took her out of my arms and screamed at me, "You dirty little girl! All you do is destroy happy families!" I responded, "If you're such a happy family, why didn't your husband tell you he's paying another girl $2,000 a month in child support? And where is he anyway? I'm sure he wants to sleep with me again." She responded, "You better not come here again or it will be your last time." And I said, "You better be careful your husband doesn't get another girl pregnant. He really doesn't care about you." That's when she suddenly ran into her apartment. I was afraid she was getting a knife, so I quickly got out of there ASAP. But on my way home, I felt weird, like I had done something wrong. It seemed that Mrs. Cumberbatch had matured and was really trying her best to make things work. Meanwhile, I was the one trying to destroy their family and making everyone miserable. I knew I'd messed up, and that's why I decided not to bother them anymore. I still receive my child support checks, but now I fully focus on my daughter and on college. Have you ever felt so lonely that you wanted to give up on life? I hope not. But you can probably imagine how I felt as a kid being raised by my uncle who acted like I didn't exist. It all started when my parents decided to leave the country. They wanted to start a new life, but unfortunately, I wasn't part of their plan. They decided I should live with my uncle, but when they brought me to his home, he didn't want me. My parents and he started screaming at each other, and in the end, my dad had to give him a bunch of money in exchange for letting me live with him. Back then, I was only 8 years old and I haven't seen my parents ever since. All I know is that their flight was going somewhere to Europe. You can probably imagine that my parents had never loved me very much. But they were still hundreds of times better than my uncle. He was a cold and emotionless man. He barely even acknowledged my existence. The only time he talked to me was when he gave me orders like to clean the bathroom or wash his clothes. I was so desperate for love or some kind of connection that my stuffed animal Theo became my best friend. I talked to him for hours because I had no one else who loved or cared about me. My uncle also never signed me up for school, so I ended up spending a whole year not leaving my uncle's apartment and only eating the rest of his meals. At one point, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed someone to talk to and walked outside. I was only 9 and hadn't felt the sunlight on my skin in more than 12 months. I felt overwhelmed and scared by all the noises and sounds. At one point, a policeman approached me and asked if I needed help. I responded, "I'm okay," but he didn't believe me. Probably because I hadn't washed my hair or clothes in weeks. I must have looked like I'd been homeless for years. He asked me where my parents were, and that's when things got really messy. The authorities found out I was living with my uncle and that he hadn't taken appropriate care of me. That's why the policeman that had found me brought me into an orphanage. Before he left, he promised me that soon someone would come and adopt me, and then I would have real parents who would love and take care of me. But I waited for 2 months and no one came to adopt me. Meanwhile, the other kids inside the orphanage called me the dirty or the weird girl. So again, I ended up feeling lonely, spending most of my time with my teddy bear, Theo. But then, after 3 months, the same policeman that had saved me from my uncle's home came back into the orphanage to look for me. He wanted to know if I had found a new family, and he wasn't alone. He had brought his wife with him. It felt so good to see him again, even though I was too shy to talk to him, but I could feel that he cared about me. When he said, "My wife and I have thought about this for a long time, and we wanted to ask you if you would like to become our daughter and be a part of our family," I wanted to scream, "Yes, yes!" But after years of neglect, I was too shy and couldn't bring out a word. In the end, he told me to think about it, and that he would come back the next week to ask me again. But while he and his wife were on their way out, I quickly drew a painting and ran after them. When I had stopped them, I showed them my drawing. It was me holding both their hands, and I had written Mom and Dad over them. It was the only way I could express myself. I still remember how they both took me into their arms. It felt so warm and so good to be touched by another human being. It felt like years of pain were being healed inside my body. Afterward, my new parents went back into the orphanage to sign the papers to adopt me, and by the next day, I was living with them in their home. They didn't have a bed for me, so I had to sleep right between them. But of course I didn't mind, because for the first time I could remember I didn't feel lonely or abandoned. My adoptive parents give me endless amounts of love, and there's nothing more important for a kid than to be loved. I just wanted to say thank you to my dad and my mom. You have literally saved me, and therefore you will always be my heroes. Thank you so much.
All families have secrets. I discovered ours when I was 14. It was a letter from my mom to my dad. She wrote, "Living with you was hell and I don't regret breaking up with you. But I do hope that you will fix your problems and come back someday." I was confused and asked my mom about it. She told me that before I was born, my dad was an alcoholic. That's why she left him. However, my dad went into therapy and sobered up. Afterwards, he begged my mom for forgiveness. She accepted, and then they had their first child, my sister Stacy. However, Dad struggled with being a father and started drinking again. Most of the time, he did it when Mom wasn't home so she wouldn't know. But one day, something tragic happened. When Stacy was 2, Dad was supposed to take care of her, but instead he drank a whole bottle of vodka and passed out. Meanwhile, my sister was playing with some toys when she swallowed one and started to choke. Luckily, my mom came home just in time and rescued her, but Stacy could have died. That's why Dad decided to go back to therapy, and this time he stopped drinking for good. Then I was born, and we were a regular family all my life. Dad would support me at my judo tournaments, and I knew I could talk to him about anything. But then one day my dad went to a wedding of his colleague. When he got back, he was covered in bruises. He admitted that he'd gotten so drunk that he fell over a balcony, and only by luck he didn't suffer any serious injuries. He promised it would never happen again, but soon he started going to bars every night. Mom was pissed, so they argued a lot. I think that's why my dad spent even less time at home. Finally, Mom decided to move out. She asked if I wanted to go with her or stay with Dad. Well, Stacy went with our mom, and I didn't want my dad to be alone, so I just stayed with him. However, he barely came home, and I felt very lonely. Sometimes my best friend Becky would come and keep me company, but one time she went to the bathroom and I heard her scream. It turned out that my dad had passed out naked. Becky thought he was dead, but I knew that he had just drunk too much alcohol. Luckily, Becky didn't tell anyone at school what she had seen at my home. However, she never came back again. Please understand that my dad is not a bad person. I mean, he never got violent or anything like that. He just doesn't have control over himself. That's why I kept telling him to go to therapy again, but he wouldn't. Every once in a while, he would say he was sorry for being such a terrible dad, but nothing changed. Every night, I was scared something would happen to him, so I always stayed awake until he got home, even if it was 4 a.m. Then I'd run to the door and help him get to bed. If I didn't, he would fall and hurt himself. After 2 years, I couldn't take it anymore. I was tired and my grades were suffering with the stress of taking care of him. I said he would either have to sober up or I would go live with Mom. It broke my heart when he told me to go away and live with my mom. I really wanted him to get better, but in the end, I had to accept that I can't fix my dad. He needs to do that himself. But when he's ready to quit drinking, I'll be there for him.
Last year, my classmate Clara asked me to come over to her place and help with some homework. I was really excited because I normally wasn't invited anywhere. I'm more the shy and quiet type. Well, I went over to her place, but instead of doing homework, we ended up talking, laughing, and kissing. We had perfect chemistry. And soon we were in an official relationship, with holding hands and stuff like that. I think both of us were quite happy, but there was one problem. Brandon. He was a douchebag and always flirted with Clara. I didn't even care, but Clara always smiled at him and giggled at his stupid jokes. It really made me feel insecure. Everyone thought Brandon was amazing, especially the girls. But I knew he was just a douche who bullied weaker people and disturbed classes. One day, he came over to me and he said, "Be careful, I won't steal your girl. She likes me more than you anyway," and then laughed. I wanted to punch him in his face, but he was stronger than me, so I didn't do anything. But after that, my insecurities grew out of control. I felt like Clara was out of my league and deserved someone better than me. I decided to break up, but before I could do anything, she sent me a text asking to come over. She said, "We need to talk." I got there and she immediately started crying, telling me she had met with Brandon behind my back and that they were in a relationship now. It felt like a punch in the gut. Clara had betrayed me with the one person I hated the most. I was so angry I wanted to scream, but I left without saying anything, feeling like a complete loser. My next day in school was the worst. Everyone made fun of me, saying Brandon had stolen my girlfriend. To make things worse, he kissed her in front of the whole class, which made everyone laugh at me even more. But a few months later, the dream couple broke up. Brandon said he had slept with too many other girls, and Clara couldn't take it anymore. Even though I felt like Clara got what she deserved, I still felt bad for her. One, she texted me, "Hey, how are you?" And I desperately wanted to reply. But there was no way I could ever forgive her, so I just blocked her. It was tough, but I think I understand why girls love Brandon so much. He might be a jerk to me, but with the girls he's confident and funny. I'm more the opposite, insecure and boring. But I'm trying to change that now. I'm doing stand-up comedy twice a week, and it really pushes me out of my comfort zone. Sometimes drunk people tell me I suck, but I just laugh it off and continue my set. I actually kinda enjoy being the center of attention, and I've even had a few girls interested in me. It might take a while, but I'm confident I'm gonna find someone who won't cheat on me.
Hey, I'm Steve, and I'm in big trouble. I recently found proof that my dad is a real-life cannibal. I'm not joking here. And I'm not sure if I should contact the police or FBI, but I know I have to do something, because my dad needs to be stopped. I should have realized that he was weird when I was a kid. My dad always told me stories about a cannibal tribe in the Brazilian Amazonas. He told those stories with so much detail as if he had experienced it himself. He said they normally only ate deceased people, but sometimes when they thought someone was a sorcerer or a witch, they would make an exception and eat that person alive. To make things worse, he told me they mostly accused little girls of being witches. He also said that those indigenous Brazilian tribes would go out and try to capture men of other tribes and then do a big feast eating them. Listening to his stories as a kid was scary. But I was young, and I kind of thought my dad's obsession with cannibalism was normal. He also has a bunch of human skulls all over our house, and when I asked him where he got those from, he said he bought them on eBay. But I highly doubt that that's true, because 4 years ago, he changed careers. He went from being a school teacher to becoming a crematorium operator. His new job is all about turning dead corpses into ashes, and it's his duty to treat those bodies with respect. But I suspect that he is taking those bodies apart and secretly eating them. The other weird thing he does is fly to Brazil once a year. My mom told me he has family over there, and I believed her as a kid. But why had I never seen my Brazilian family? And why had I never been invited to visit them? Well, one day I found out the truth. I went through my dad's wardrobe, and at the bottom, I found a hidden box. When I opened it, I saw several sets of human teeth. It was so creepy. And there was one photo showing my dad wearing those teeth around his head, surrounded by some indigenous jungle people. Another photo showed my dad holding a spear in his hand next to some indigenous warriors. It looked like they were about to go hunting. I just hope it wasn't for some other humans. But now I knew where my dad went once a year. He visited the Brazilian Amazon to hang out with some cannibalistic, warmongering tribe members. And maybe he went on hunting other humans with them so they could eat them afterward. I hope this was all a big joke, but when I confronted my dad and asked if he had ever eaten human flesh, his response was so creepy. A big grin appeared on his face, and then he asked me, "How do you know, son?" At first, I didn't know how to respond, but once I had gathered myself, I said, "You are a disgusting and evil psychopath." But he responded, No, it's not evil and it's not disgusting. I mean, what's the difference between eating pig, beef, or human? There is no difference. And if a human dies of a natural cause, then it's not evil to eat the corpse, because a dead person doesn't care. So that's why you became a crematory operator? So you can have free lunch at work? I asked him. Ugh, those are old and sick people. That would be disgusting. No, I'm just fascinated by dead bodies. It's really no big deal, he responded. Wow, my dad thinks that being a cannibal is no biggie. I'm honestly scared of him, because I don't know what he is capable of. If he is willing to spend thousands of dollars each year to fly to Brazil just to eat other humans, then he might also be willing to eat my mom or me. And one time, he asked me if I wanted to come with him to Brazil. He said it would be a great adventure, and I could finally develop a taste for you know what. He said it's better than anything else he had ever tasted. But why does my dad think that I am even slightly interested in cannibalism? This whole thing is so disturbing. I am seriously considering calling the FBI, but I don't want my dad to go to prison because then my mom would be very lonely. To make things worse, my dad recently bought a huge barbecue grill. I am suspecting the worst, but so far, he has only used it when I wasn't at home, so I have no idea what he's eating on it. To be honest, if someone wants to eat my corpse after I'm dead, I wouldn't mind. And I recently read on the internet that more and more moms eat their own placentas after giving birth. It's so disgusting, but it's one of the hottest trends out there. And even Kim Kardashian says she has eaten her own placenta after giving birth. I guess, as long as you don't hurt others, you can eat whatever you want. Unfortunately, I don't think my dad is following that rule. I assume that he goes to Brazil once a year to hunt for fresh human meat. And 2 weeks ago, he cooked us a nice soup with pork meat inside. Or so I thought. Because 2 days later, he asked me how I liked the soup, and when I told him that it tasted good, I saw this creepy little smirk on his face, which means that I might have already eaten another human without knowing it. Please let me know in the comments what you would do in my situation. Shall I forget about my dad being a cannibal, or shall I contact the FBI? I mean, my dad is currently working as a crematory operator, which means that he might be eating your dead grandpa right now. Would you mind him doing that? Thank you for listening to my story, and please subscribe to this channel for more animated stories.
Hey, my name is Miranda, and I want to tell you why I got plastic surgery and whether it helped me win over my dream guy Jordan or not. It all started when I was a teenager. My Latina mom always told me I looked ugly because I didn't have a big butt or big breasts. She said I couldn't compete with the other girls unless I got plastic surgery. Well, it was easy for her to criticize me because she was born very curvy, and even in her 50s, guys couldn't stop staring at her. Her words made me feel very insecure about my looks, but she was right. The guys at my high school weren't really interested in me. Especially my crush Jordan was completely ignoring me. He was without a doubt the most handsome and popular guy in our school. And I always wondered if he'd be interested in dating me if I got bigger butt and bigger breasts. Well, for my 18th birthday, my mom gifted me a butt implant surgery. The operation was brutal, but wow, after the operation, when I saw my ass, I was shocked. It was so much bigger than I had expected. And when my mom saw it, she started jumping up and down, screaming and cheering. And for the first time in my life, she told me I looked good. I didn't want to hide my ass from the world, so the first thing I did was upload a picture of my ass onto Instagram. Of course, my friends were all shocked and wrote, "What the hell happened?" I hoped they would be supportive, but when we met up, they all made fun of me and said I would do anything to get attention from guys. It hurt to hear them say that, and since then we haven't talked to each other. I realized that if my friends didn't support my decision, then they weren't my real friends to begin with. I continued to upload photos of my butt, and in just over 3 months, I gained 10,000 Instagram followers. My mom told me I could become famous and that I needed my breast done next. She even paid for it again. After my breast enlargement surgery, every guy stared at me, no matter where I went. I probably looked a bit over the top, to be honest. But luckily, I live near Hollywood where many women have breast and butt operations, so I don't stand out too much. And finally, I felt attractive enough to contact my longtime crush Jordan on Instagram. He responded to me immediately, and after a few days of chatting, we had our first date. At first, he couldn't believe we had gone to the same high school. He said he had never noticed me, so I had to tell him about my butt and breast surgery. Luckily, he didn't mind. He accepted me for who I was, and we officially started dating. However, it was the worst relationship you could ever imagine. He treated me like an object, and talked to all his friends about my butt and my body even when I was right next to him. Knowing that he was only with me for my body made me feel extremely insecure about myself. I was always scared he would leave me as soon as he found a better-looking girl. But at least I had many guys interested in me anyway. So I simply broke up with him and started dating another guy that had DM'd me over Instagram. He was a well-known DJ here in Los Angeles. and he treated me with much more respect. But then, after 2 weeks, I caught him cheating on me with another girl, so I ended up breaking up with him too. It felt like guys only wanted me for a quick fling and then dumped me. They had no interest in a real, long-term relationship with me. That's why I stopped dating guys I found on Instagram. Instead, I signed up for college, with the hopes of finding a decent guy there. I'm studying marketing, and currently I'm going on dates with 2 different guys. I've learned from my past mistakes, and now I'm taking things slow. I first want to get to know the guys before I jump right in. I also already know that I'll become a real estate agent, because I think my butt and breasts will make me stand out and help me sell properties. So please understand that getting plastic surgery won't magically fix all your problems. I thought I wanted to date the most attractive guy I could find, but now I know that what I really want is to simply be in a relationship with a good guy that I can trust, and who loves me for who I am, not for the way I look. But at least it increased my confidence, because now I feel comfortable in my own skin. Even though the butt implants are seriously uncomfortable, they feel like I'm sitting on 2 baseballs all day long. There's no way I'd ever be able to get a job where I have to sit on a chair all day. It'd be a nightmare. Just a heads up, I suggest thinking twice before getting plastic surgery. Thank you for listening to my story, and please, subscribe to this channel. When my mom was pregnant, her doctor told her she was expecting 1 baby girl, but instead she got us, conjoined twins. While my mom loved us deeply, my dad told her to let us die. He suggested to accidentally let us drop on the floor because no one would be suspicious of us dying anyway. When our mom refused, he said, "Well, at least give them up for adoption." But my mom wouldn't give in, so our dad broke up with her and left. Now imagine a single mom raising twins. It wasn't easy, but doctors offered her money so they could do experiments with us. The most cruel one was giving one of us electroshocks to see if the other one would feel the pain. Our mom didn't know what they were doing to us, but when we told her about it afterward, she promised us no more experiments. By the way, my name is Elaine, and her name is Buttface. Let me tell you about our lives and challenges. You see, my sister and I always got along quite well, but in 10th grade, she developed a crush on our classmate Derek, who liked her back. They constantly flirted with each other, and I had to listen to all of it. But Derek was one of the most boring guys in the world, so I told my sister she had to stop seeing him. Of course she was angry at me, but afterward we made a deal. We had to find a guy that we both loved. However, on our 21st birthday, we got approached by a Chinese lady. She said she was working for a rich businessman who wanted us to come to China. I said, "For what?" And she responded, "My boss really likes the way you 2 look, and he will pay you a lot of money." "How much?" I asked. And she laid a briefcase on the table. When she opened it, we saw lots of money, and she said, "He will pay you $1 million in cash if you're going to stay with him for 6 months. We both looked at each other. This sounded kinda sketchy, but $1 million was a lot of money, so I asked her to show us a photo of him. The guy was already in his 50s and a bit fat, but he looked very friendly, so we both agreed on flying to China to meet him. When we arrived at his mansion, he greeted us with a big smile and gave us a hug. He wasn't as creepy at all. He was more like a big teddy bear, so we didn't mind that he pressed his head against our middle breast. I mean, we knew exactly what he was paying us for, but soon things started to become a little bit uncomfortable. He used us as a status symbol, and whenever his friends came over, we had to dress up in lingerie and serve them dinner. His friends would always be in awe and then laugh at us. Of course, it was quite uncomfortable to be half naked and stared at by a bunch of guys, but that was nothing compared to the shows we had to perform for them. But I don't want to go into that. Anyway, when we came back to the US, we bought ourselves an apartment and got a job at a bank. They even paid us 2 salaries, but what we really wanted was to get into a relationship. So we tried out the dating app Tinder. Most people didn't believe we were real, but Douglas did. We met him in a small park, and for the first time, both of us had great chemistry with the same guy. He was funny, charming, and good-looking. It only took 8 months for him to move into our apartment, but we quickly learned that he was manipulative and toxic. One night, I was laying in bed next to him while my sister was asleep. He began telling me that he loved me more than my sister because she was annoying and stuck up. Hearing him trash talk my sister somehow made me feel special, like I was better than her. But it turns out that he was having secret conversations with my sister too. One night, I woke up and heard them talking. My sister was giggling and I asked, "What are you guys talking about?" She responded, "Oh, nothing important." And I said, "Wait, did he tell you that he likes you more than me?" My sister responded, "Yes, he did." And I said, He told me the same thing. Well, a few minutes later, we had thrown him out of our apartment. You see, being conjoined twins is like being married on steroids. Even though you are two different people, you're still the same person because even if my sister has a bad day, I will have a bad day too. So it's very important that we take care of each other. Luckily, our current boyfriend Robert is a good guy who loves us equally and even has a fetish for our 3 breasts. You must be wondering whether one guy can pleasure both of us, and the answer is yes, because we share most of our organs, including our you-know-what. Anyway, a lot of people ask us if we want to be separated someday, and the answer is yes. If scientists could grow us a second body and put one of our heads onto it, we would definitely do it. But that doesn't mean that we aren't happy with our current lives. Right now, we are even trying to have a baby and start our own family. Hey, I'm Lima, and I want to tell you about my classmates and how they forced me to do their homework. They thought I wouldn't fight back, but well, they were dead wrong about that. It all started when one of my classmates wrote me a message on Facebook that said, "Hey, want to go with me and Sarah to a party tonight?" I responded with, "Of course," because I had never been to a party before, and I desperately wanted to be part of the cool kids. But then they wrote, "Okay, you can come pick us up with your car at 10 p.m. I realized they had only invited me because they needed a car. But I didn't really mind. I was just happy to have the chance to go to my first party ever. I spent at least 3 hours doing my makeup and finding the right outfit. After I had picked my 2 classmates up, we swung by the gas station to fill up the gas. I kinda hoped they would split the bill with me, because that would have been the decent thing to do, but instead they brought 24 beers to the cashier and said, "Sorry, Lima, we've forgotten our money at home. Do you mind paying for these?" Well, I didn't want to ruin the mood, so I just paid for the gas and the beer and kept quiet. But then it got worse. When we pulled up in front of the house party, they said, "Thanks for driving us here. See you on Monday." I said, "Wait, what? You don't want me to go with you to the party?" And then they said, "Oh, we didn't think you were that kind of girl, the type who likes to party and have fun." Then they just got out of my car without thanking me or even saying goodbye. I felt like a complete and utter loser. But I was so angry that I decided to go to the party on my own. Well, that turned out to be the worst mistake of my life. Because there, I drank alcohol for the first time. And then I found a bikini and some wardrobe, put it on, and told everyone at the party that I had a big crush on my classmate Ben. I even told them what I would do with him if he was my boyfriend. I said a lot of embarrassing stuff. But I was so out of it that I didn't notice my classmate filming it on her smartphone. The following Monday, my 2 classmates came up to me and said, "Hey Lima, can you do our homework for us?" I was still angry at them and I told them, no chance on earth am I doing that. But then they said that if I didn't do their homework, they would show everyone the video they'd taken of me at the party, including my crush Ben. I couldn't believe it. I was so shocked that they'd have the audacity to film me, and now they were outright blackmailing me? In the end, I did their homework, even though it took me 3 hours. But then the next week, one of them came up to me again, and this time she said, "Okay, you have to help me tomorrow in our physics exam. If I don't pass, I will have to repeat the whole year, so I want you to write down the correct answers on a piece of paper and hide them under the bin inside the bathroom." I explained to her that I couldn't risk doing that because if I got caught, I would get an F on the exam and then I couldn't go to my dream university after high school. But instead of being considerate, she just gave me a wicked smile and said she could send the video to everyone in a matter of seconds. Wow, that was a big mistake on her part, because even though I'm a sweet girl, I can also bite back when the moment calls for it. The same day, I went to the principal and told her about my classmates and how she was threatening me with a video she'd taken of me where I had embarrassed myself. In fact, I had recorded the conversation with my classmate on my cell phone where she'd been blackmailing me. When the principal heard the recording, she told me I had made the right decision by telling her, and then we made a plan. On the day of the exam, I wrote the complete wrong answers on the piece of paper. Then I asked my teacher if I could go to the bathroom, and that's when I left the answers under the bin. When my classmate went to the bathroom after me to pick up the piece of paper with the answers, My principal was hiding inside the toilet to catch her. Afterwards, she brought the girl into our classroom and said, "I just wanted to notify you all that I caught this girl cheating inside the bathroom. She won't be finishing the exam, that's for sure." For the rest of the exam, I was so nervous. I could barely focus. Had I done the right thing? Would my classmates show my embarrassing video to everyone? Well, that same day I went to the principal's office again, and she told me that my classmate had been suspended indefinitely from our school, and that her parents would make sure she deleted the video and didn't show it to anyone. But of course, she did it anyway. And she was so mad at me that she published it on Facebook. It was humiliating, and my whole school saw me talking about my classmate Ben and how I wanted to make love with him. I tried to be proud of myself for doing the right thing and standing up for myself, but I just ended up being seriously anxious about going back to school now that everyone knew I had a big crush on Ben. After the video went viral, I went to school just like every other day. And of course, all my classmates made fun of me, but it wasn't as bad as I had imagined it to be. They all made jokes, but not in a disrespectful way. From then on, they called me the crazy party girl, and even Ben came over to me and said, "I'm not surprised you have a crush on me. It's true, I'm a bit of a stud." And then we all laughed. It's not always easy to do the right thing. But at least I don't have to do anyone's homework anymore. And I now know that I can stand up for myself.